Hello, everybody. Hello, and I hope you're all really well. So it's good morning here. It's a lovely day here in Northern Ireland. It's a lovely, fresh kind of morning. I went out for a walk, and gosh, I really enjoyed it this morning. I was going to drop off my two sons to their school, so I dropped them off, and I thought, well, I've got an hour to myself. What am I going to do with this? So I had a think, and I decided that I would go for a walk. And I really enjoyed myself. Just it's so rare to get a bit of time to myself with 3 kids and working and the kids to pick up and drop off and do all of that. My daughter, she's the youngest. She's 3, and, I'm with her a lot of the time, but we share that between my wife and I. But today, she actually went off to childcare, so I really had an hour entirely to myself, and it was valuable. I tell you, I'm so grateful. It was wonderful, and it's so important to have, time to yourself. So I went for a walk by the river, and it was lovely. So I hope you're all doing well as well, and looking forward to the weekend, I'm sure, because it's Friday and it's the best day of the week, isn't it? Because we know the weekend is just around the corner. All right, so I will tell you the plan for today. So I'm going to be teaching you some sign language. Now, you'll see some of the pictures. They'll give you a clue as to what we're doing, because we're going to be talking about vocabulary to do with work and people's professions. And then I'm also going to explain today a little bit about deaf culture and what that means, what that phrase deaf culture means. So that's coming up a little bit later. And if you have any questions, please type them into the chat. I'm going to keep an eye on them, and we'll see what comments we have coming through. Now, I'm going to do my best. I'll say that from now because I'll say that from the off, because it can be kind of distracting watching the interpreter to make sure she understands and then keeping an eye on comments. So if I miss a question, apologies in advance, but please do type to me, and I'll see your comments coming through, I hope. So, for those of you who are here for the first time to our sign language class, really warm welcome to you. And for those who've been with us throughout the weeks, well, it's great to have you back again. So, I'm going to teach you some vocabulary to do with work. Now, it's just basic sign language, but let's go. So, work. Our first sign is work. 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 Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to ask some questions and then how to respond. So you point to the person you're talking to. And for those of you who are here for the first time, let me just explain about pointing. So this is me. This is the sign for me, and I point to myself. This is the sign for you. I point to you. He, she, they. Okay. So me, you, they, or he, sorry, she, they. Okay, so pointing is so important, and it's a really important part of our language. So, and an important part of deaf culture. Now, in hearing culture, pointing can be seen as a bit rude, but deaf culture is completely different, and it's a great opportunity today because I'm going to be explaining a little bit more about deaf culture later. But just to say for the moment, pointing is really important. Okay, so let's teach you how to ask questions related to work. You work what? Okay, so now I'm going to explain a little bit about why I've taught you that. So, and about the questions. So, who, what, when, where, why, how, all of that. So, in BSL, in BSL grammar, which is my language's grammar, the question always goes at the end. So, for example, you name what? What's your name? So I'll do that again. You name what? Let's think of a different question, a different example. You live where? Where do you live? So let's do that again. You live where? And let's think, can I think of another example? He likes America. Why? Why does he like America? So let's do that again. He likes America. Why? Why does he like America? So the question, as you saw from those examples, always goes at the end of the sentence. All right, so let's get back to work. So you work what? So let's do that again. You work what? And let's do that one more time without the English. Great, well done. Now, if you know the sign for your specific job, brilliant, great. If you don't know the sign, don't worry. That's why we're here today. We're going to teach you a few different signs to do with common jobs. Okay, so please do feel free to add to our vocabulary list, type in the job that you do, and we'll give you a sign for it. Okay, ready to start? Now, before I start, I have explained it before, but just for those who are coming for the first time, I'll explain this again briefly. So there is such a thing as regional variation in sign language. So different areas if across the UK will sign slightly differently. It's not that it's standard across the whole of the UK. So Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, and Wales will have different vocabulary items. Now the grammar and the structure of the language is completely the same, and also the language it's BSL across the UK, but it's a bit like accents. Do you know where people will have different accents in different areas, or different local kind of vocabulary that they use? And a lot of people say, well, why isn't sign language the same everywhere? And I think that's a really good question. But it's the same for accents. You've got a northern accent, you've got a southern accent. And because historically, deaf people went to boarding school for their education. So you find that regional variation evolved from the boarding schools because that was where deaf people congregated. And then also the language evolves over time. So that's another reason for variation. So with any language, any natural language, it evolves over time. And that's how we see emerging trends throughout different parts of the UK. But certainly when deaf children were sent to boarding schools, where you see boarding schools historically were situated, you'll find regional variations coming out of those geographical areas. So it's just the same as accents. But you've got to remember, back in those days, there was no social media. There was no sharing of language outside of the boarding school particularly. So anyway, that's a little history lesson. Are we ready to start? I'm certainly ready to start teaching, so I'm sure you're ready to start learning. Let's go. Okay, so first, what do we have? Doctor. So in England, the sign is doctor. Okay, so it's this kind of movement across your wrist, doctor. Okay, doctor. So that's in England, Wales, Scotland, so GB would all use that same sign, doctor. Northern Ireland, we sign it differently. We sign doctor. Doctor. So you can see it's slightly different. Okay, so let's go on to our next one. Nurse. Okay, nurse. See how it's 2 fingers on each hand, going from your head down to your chest. Nurse. Okay, great. Well done. Third. Our third sign is teacher. So England, Scotland, and Wales, they would sign it like this. Teacher. 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 In Northern Ireland, though, we sign it like this. Teacher. 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 Sorry, everyone who's here for the first time. So I should have explained. I'm actually based in Belfast, and that's why I make a point of including the Northern Irish signs. So you might notice as well the accent of our interpreter. She's Northern Irish as well. So you got a double Northern Irish taste of things today. So we're both based in Belfast. Okay, let's do one more. Okay, classroom assistant. So in England, let's do the English, Scottish, and Welsh sign first. Classroom assistant. Classroom assistant. So it's the C hand shape. So you make a C with either hand, and then it goes like a ruff around your neck. Classroom assistant. Let's do that again. Classroom assistant. And in Northern Ireland, the sign is classroom assistant. Classroom assistant. Okay. So let's repeat what we've done so far. Ready? So we'll do the English ones first. Well, English, Scottish, and Welsh. Northern Ireland's often doing their own thing, but we always say, oh, that's the English sign, that's the English sign. And I always forget about the other two. Anyway, apologies. Sorry, shouldn't. Okay. So, doctor. Doctor. Nurse. Nurse. Teacher. Teacher. Classroom assistant. Classroom assistant. Okay, now for the Northern Irish. Doctor. Doctor. Nurse. Nurse. Teacher. Teacher. Classroom assistant. Classroom assistant. Great, well done. Okay, let's move on to our second page of words. Let's do barrister. 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 Okay, let's do solicitor. So, the GB sign, England, Scotland and Wales. Solicitor. 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 Now, the Northern Irish one. Solicitor. So it's the S, letter S in the BSL alphabet, and it's a double S. Solicitor. 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 Okay, great. Now, social worker. Social worker. Social. So it's two sort of C hand shapes where your braces would be if you were wearing a pair of braces, and your thumbs touch your chest. Solicitor. Oh, sorry, social worker. Social worker. So, social worker. Okay, great. So let's move on to accountant. 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 And bank. 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 Okay, electrician. 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 Plumber. So you've got two fingers that interlock and you move it as if a wrench on a pipe. Plumber. 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 Okay. Carpenter. Carpenter. So you see the movement there? Carpenter. So carpenter. Okay, great. Now let's test you. I'm going to sign something and I want you to guess what it is. So you can either chat to people if you're watching this with other people, or you can type the responses into the chat box. But I want you to think what it is that I'm signing. Okay? So this is all part of the fun, so don't worry too much. Right, ready? Question 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. There's a couple there to choose from. Number 7. Number 8. Okay, again, a variation in there. Number 9. Number 10. Number 11. Number 12. Okay, and there's a regional variation in there. Okay, well done, everyone. Ready for the answers? Okay, let's see, drum roll time. All right, number 1 was, of course, social worker. Social worker. Number 2, what was that one? Accountant. Number 3 was nurse. Number 4 was bank. Number 5, what was that one? It was plumber. Number 6, what do you think? Teacher. Or if you're in Northern Ireland, teacher. Okay, number 7, what did you get? Carpenter. Number 8, what about that one? It was doctor. Or in Northern Ireland, doctor. Number 9, what about that one? Barrister. Number 10, electrician. Number 11, what do you think? It was classroom assistant. Or classroom assistant in Northern Ireland. Number 12, what do you think about that? Solicitor. Solicitor. Okay, well done. Now, I've got another test for you. So, I'm going to point to certain words and I want you to sign them back to me, okay? So, I really do encourage you to sign along with us, all right? Ready? What is the sign for classroom assistant? Yeah, well done. Classroom assistant. Or classroom assistant. What about nurse? What's the sign for nurse? Yeah, nurse. What about social worker? Yes, that's right, social worker. What about bank? Yes, bank. What about electrician? Yes, that's right, electrician. What about the sign for doctor? Yeah, that's right, doctor. Or, of course, doctor. What about the sign for accountant? Great, accountant. What about the sign for plumber? Yeah, that's right, plumber. What about the sign for carpenter? Yeah, carpenter. Let's do one more. How about solicitor? Yes, that's right, solicitor. Or solicitor. Okay, well done, everyone, and a big round of applause for you all. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of break from teaching sign language now, and I'm going to just give you a very brief kind of insight into deaf culture and what it is. So, deaf culture is really important, of course, if you are learning, well, if you're learning any spoken language, you always are so interested in you kind of working out what that culture is, working out what that language is, the grammar, how everything works. It's a challenge. You got to piece it all together. When you're learning any language, for example, Spanish, then when you learn the language in itself isn't really enough. Sometimes it's only when you go to Spain that you really understand the culture, the Spanish culture. Once you're there and immersed in it, then you start to understand the language. So you need both, don't you? You need the language on its own or an explanation of the culture doesn't really hack it. You need both of those together to fully understand another culture. So I'll give you a brief history of sign language, or sorry, deaf culture. I won't be waffling on too long, don't worry. But of course, it's really important for you guys. The most important way that you'll learn, or the most important thing to help your learning, is to meet people in the deaf community, to engage with the deaf community, to see how people get. Well, let's look at how deaf people get people's attention. So whenever you're speaking to someone in English, you would say, "Oh, excuse me," or you would call someone's name. So for hearing culture, you would never do that. You would never approach someone and touch them. An unsolicited tap on their shoulder or arm would be really strange. But for a deaf person, it is really important that you tap them on the shoulder to alert them to the fact you want to communicate with them. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Okay, if you were in a classroom, and so there were a lot of, imagine it's a classroom full of deaf children, and everyone's, talking to their mates, looking over here, looking over there, and the teacher wants a way of getting everyone's attention at once. How do you do? Do you go to the first person, tap them, the next person, tap them, the next person, tap them, until you've gone around the whole class? I mean, that seems a bit cumbersome. So, what ways do you think what a teacher could attract the attention of all the class? What's the equivalent of saying, "Okay, guys, listen up," in deaf culture? So, what's the best way? I'd love to hear what you think. What's the best way of attracting the attention of lots, a group of, say, children, rowdy school kids? You can type your answers, but I'd be keen to hear what you think. I'll give you the answer in 10 seconds. So let's see. Hmm. Have a think. What do you think? What's the best way? Well, let me tell you. The best way of getting someone's attention or a group is to switch the lights on and off briefly. Yeah. So lights, obviously, you can see it no matter where you're looking in the room. So switching it off and on makes everyone realize, gosh, someone wants our attention. Or you're quite right. Some of you have said you wave. So waving, waving waits. You've got to wave for a while until everyone's sort of looked over that direction. And sometimes it'll be like dominoes of people saying, "Oh no, they've waved. Look back," and sort of waving through like a like a Mexican wave through the crowd until everyone knows that the teacher at the front of the room um, wants their attention. And that can take a bit of time. Whereas the instant option is to switch the lights on and off, and then everyone knows instantly. So you can tap people on the shoulder, you can switch the lights on and off, you can wave, or you can bang your foot on the floor or the table. Now, not in a very aggressive way, but in a way that sends out vibrations that anyone at the table will be able to feel and know that someone's trying to get their attention. And that's just deaf culture. It's not a rude thing, it's just the culture. So that's our culture in terms of how to get someone's attention. Now, I want to talk about eye contact. Okay. So whenever you're in the deaf community, you'll see the deaf people use eye contact a lot more. They maintain eye contact. They're seeking out eye contact, and they're trying to establish it all the time. Now, it could seem weird, but that's because it's so vital to communication. So in deaf culture, if you look away, if you break someone's eye gaze, that's actually considered rude. Now, it's not necessarily rude in hearing culture. You can be listening to someone and look out the window as you're chatting, and that's fine. But actually looking away, breaking eye contact in deaf culture shows that you're really not interested. You're not interested in what the person's saying to you or in talking to the person. And it can be quite abrupt or quite shocking to have someone drop eye contact with you when you're trying to communicate with them. So in terms of communication, make sure you maintain eye contact. Now, if you it's engaging with the deaf community is of course really good practice for your romantic life as well, because if you're comfortable maintaining eye contact in the deaf community, well, then your partner's going to know the next time you go out on a date that you are absolutely there and present with them. Often deaf groups they'll be chatting away and signing away to each other, and people people outside of that group become invisible. It's as if everyone else around them doesn't exist anymore, because the group that's communicating is the entire bubble to that person. I mean, a group could be chatting, someone could completely wipe out, fall on the floor, smash a load of glasses. Deaf people wouldn't notice, unless, of course, the deaf person maybe has some residual hearing, or because that's another thing to talk about, is the different levels of hearing loss amongst the deaf community. But generally speaking, you're that absorbed in the conversation, and because the group is talking, they're wanting to take on board everything that's happening in that conversation. Everything outside will be irregardless or irrespective of what's going on around them. They'll be completely absorbed in the conversation. It could be that someone's cheersing with glasses, and there's clinks of glasses and doors banging and people talking and people laughing. Deaf people really don't care. They are there and present in the conversation, in the group, maintaining eye contact and communicating. So that's kind of explains a bit about deaf behavior as well. So you'll see deaf people waving, maintaining eye contact, maybe tapping, banging on the table or the floor to get someone's attention. That can all be seen as weird if you're not aware that that's part of deaf culture. If you just think that's the individual behaving like that, it can be weird, but it's absolutely not. It's part of our culture. Okay, so I'm going to explain, I've explained a bit about behaviours. Now I want to explain a little bit about deaf history. Now, it'll be brief, don't worry, but you might already be aware, but certainly in the pre-1880s, there was the golden age of sign language. And in schools there was sign language, teachers would sign, everyone would sign, and the world was so accessible pre-1880s. That really was considered, like I say, the golden age of sign language. There were deaf people who were famous, they were working at the absolute top of their field, they were rocking it. But in 1880 there was a conference, it was called Congress in Milan. And at that event, they took the decision to ban sign language in education. So this congress was deaf educators and deaf teachers, deaf instructors, and they believed that teaching kids sign language will damage their opportunities to develop speech and to develop written English. So they thought that sign language was detrimental to the development of English. Now, this is what they believed. Okay. So then they decreed that sign language worldwide would be banned in education. Now, from that decision, deaf people suffered. From that point onwards, deaf people suffered. Education disappeared. They were being taught, deaf kids were being talked at. They didn't have any access to information. They didn't have any way of understanding what was being said to them. Lots of information was just being presented to them with no way of understanding what it was that was being said. They missed out on so much, and this happened for years. Now, in 1970, then came research, and they researched deaf kids leaving school. They looked at age 16. They said at age 16, a deaf children's literacy is the same as a hearing child at age 9. There was a huge discrepancy between that, and that was really upsetting to see. But finally, we had the proof that the oral system did not work, and that's the oral system of teaching in English without sign language. So we were seeing that. As I mentioned earlier, deaf people will have different levels of hearing. So someone might have a moderate hearing loss, and they might be able to hear some English, well enough. But then you'll also get some people who are profoundly deaf. In between, you have some serious, severe hearing loss. So there's different levels of hearing loss according to the medical profession, just for categorizing hearing loss. And so you'll find that profoundly deaf people, whenever they were in education, they were really focusing on the teacher, trying to pick out the word, focusing on the lip reading, trying to pick up just anything that they could. They could maybe glean some information from the teacher's face. And you could just imagine how exhausting that is, trying to focus, trying to grab onto any information that you could possibly get whenever you have no access to it. So you're missing, as soon as you miss the context, you miss the entire concept, which means that you've kind of missed the entire lesson. So if you're focusing on what was that word, your brain is completely taken up with trying to piece together what the words might be. There's no way you can also learn what the teacher's trying to teach you. So that left deaf kids who were, reliant on that kind of communication at a real disadvantage. So the deaf community started campaigning for accessibility. They wanted sign language back. So in the 1970s onwards, that was really when the campaign started, up to 2003. And 2003 is an important year because that was when sign language was recognised by government. Well, in Northern Ireland, it was 2004, but it was finally recognised by the governments, and that changed the lives of deaf people. That meant that there was suddenly more accessibility because the government recognised that BSL is a language in its own right. It meant that whenever a deaf person goes to university, they can ask for an interpreter. When they engage with social work, they can ask for an interpreter. They can have a social worker who signs. They can have access to information in sign language. If they're going to hospital, if they're engaging with a doctor, if they're going to court, then they can have access. And this is amazing. They can go to the cinema and they can have access to subtitles. On the TV, films and different TV programs will be subtitled. I mean, I remember when I was younger, I was maybe until I was about 10, there were no subtitles. Well, maybe I'm 5. There were no subtitles on TV. And then finally they came in and I thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I remember when BBC, had BBC put on subtitles. And then not all channels did at the same time, but gosh, it was revolutionary. It really gave us access. So we know that deaf awareness is spreading, so that is really, advantageous for the deaf community as well. So I've given you a taste of deaf history. Now, relating to deaf culture, what we're really proud of is the linguistics. That we're a linguistic minority. Okay, so that's what we're proud to be. We're not. That's our identity. So we are proud to be considered a community who are a linguistic minority. That we have a shared experience. That we have, we have shared understanding. That we have deaf culture. Art and history and culture and beliefs and. We share so much of that within our community. All right. I think that's plenty of my lecturing for today, but that's a little insight into deaf culture. Of course, there's so much more I could say, but at least now you'll have the basic understanding of what we mean when I say deaf culture. All right, let's go back to our vocabulary. Back to work. Shopping. So, in Northern Ireland, the sign is shopping. Okay, and in England, Scotland, and Wales, it's shopping. 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 Okay, so in Northern Ireland, let's do that again. So it's shopping, like this. Okay, I'm retired. So well, okay. Let's do England, Scotland, and Wales first. So retired. 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 Okay. In Northern Ireland, retired. Retired. I'll show you this way from this angle. Retired. Okay. Company. So, in England, Scotland, and Wales, the sign is company. 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 And in Northern Ireland, company. Company. Okay, architect. Architect. Okay, so you see this hand shape and it goes down to your elbow and then across your arm like a set square. Architect. Employed. Employed. So see the difference between work, this is work, work, and employed. Okay, so slightly different, employed. Okay, employed. Let me think, yeah. So it's self-employed. Self-employed. Okay, full-time. 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 Part-time. So it's like signing half, really. Part-time. 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 I think we've kind of done a lot at this point. So I'm thinking maybe that's enough. But let's do a recap of what we've covered so far. Okay? Shopping. Shopping. Or, in Northern Ireland, shopping. Retired. Retired. It looks like you're kind of giving up. You've had enough. You're throwing it away. Retired. I'm done. I'm finished. Time out. Retired. Retired. Or in Northern Ireland, retired. Retired. Okay. Company. Company. And in Northern Ireland, company. Architect. Where are we? Employed. Employed. Self-employed. Full-time. Full-time. Part-time. Part-time. Okay. So, can you remember where we started? And let's go right back to the start and let's have some questions. So, you work what? Okay, what do you do? You work what? I am a teacher. I am a teacher. You work what? So, or if you're in Northern Ireland, I'm a teacher. So, what do you do? I'm an architect. You work what? Me, social worker. What do you do? I'm retired. I'm retired. Okay. Happy enough? All right, great. 1 minute. Just while I check this. I'm just reading the comments. Okay. Right. Just okay, so let's go through these ones that you've requested. So, I am a life coach. Ready? Life coach. Life coach. Telecoms So telecommunications, telecoms, telecommunications manager, telecommunications manager. Sorry, I'm a bit slow finding them all. Hairdresser, hairdresser, mechanical design. So mechanical engine design. There you go. Mechanical design. Right, now home bargains. Home bargains. Because it's cheap. So this is a sign for cheap. It's a bargain. Home bargains. Office manager. Office, and then sign again, manager. And minibus. Minibus driver. Or minibus like that, but minibus, yeah. Driver. Minibus. Minibus driver. Okay. So I hope you've all enjoyed yourselves. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed learning some sign language, some vocabulary related to work, and a little bit about deaf culture as well. So there we go. And I just want to say a big thank you for coming and for giving up your time to come and learn sign language with us. And if you I know that if you practice and if you're using it, it's going to make a big difference to the deaf community. So thank you for giving up your time. I also wanted to say thank you to the Royal Voluntary Service for giving us the opportunity to come and for me to teach you sign language. And I want to say thank you to our interpreter today for working with us. It's really important that the role of the interpreter is to um, bridge the gap, I should say, between the deaf world and the hearing world, and they're the link between the two. So thank you very much to our interpreter. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. Thanks again. Bye.